Driver, step out of your vehicle.
Remember that one time you pulled me over when you were a police officer?
How can we heal our hurt world? How can we fix what's broke when we're all broken inside? We do our best to find compassion, but when we face ourselves, we often run and hide. To cool along, we pray for our enemies. We trust in the one. We pray for our enemies. We trust in the one. We trust in the one.
There are ideas which seep into the soil, that is our collective human consciousness. These ideas are the groundwater, which is available for the growing seeds of our burgeoning minds. As we become self-aware, the roots of our souls push down deep.
They say most shark attacks happen in about 3 feet of water.
However, if the waters are poisoned
That's not what I told my daughter
with fear,
when she asked about the dangers out there.
no amount
I told her there's no reason to be scared.
of these ideas,
Come on in, the water's nice and cool.
no matter how good they are,
Is it the wise man or is it the fool
will be able to bring life.
who moves beyond the
This is how the idea of freedom came to me.
tidal pool?
I've shared with you before how when I was a little boy, I felt very small. I felt so small, and I was very hurt. When I was 14, I was trying very hard to forget all about that. Do you remember that I mentioned shame? What is shame? Where does it come from? Who invented shame? Those are some big questions, and big questions can always be approached from different angles, and we can also discover different people who have learned to speak about difficult topics from their particular line of experience, and that is where being an autobiographical artist can be helpful. I am naturally an inward person. I've done many exercises to develop my outward skills, but I am rooted in the infinite depths of the inner realm. I relate to monks and mystics primarily. I don't think I truly understood that about myself until I met this cosmic teacher who, at the time, I knew as Jesus. Jesus became my inner guide, my cosmic rabbi, my fearlessness teacher. I called him my Savior, my Lord, and I cried out to him. I said many prayers and took many actions in the expression of my great zeal toward God. I grew up waiting for the next Star Wars movie to come out. When I read the second chapter of Acts, where the Spirit descends on us in the upper room, I'd found my lightsaber. I was going to be a Jesus Jedi. Man, I found me a super strong church girl who was ready to follow the Christ in me. We started having beautiful children. Eventually, we sold everything, a beautiful, disturbing, and subversive Christ prayer, embraced as it could be in our little church community.
We pray for our enemies. We trust.
I believe that it was because of this prayer that we prayed with our young family's sacred finances that I am on the path that I am on today. Let me correct myself and say the path that we are on today.
We trust in the one.
Leaving my children's mother was the highest form of leadership that I could discover for myself, and for the family that I'd become unfit to serve, as I had compromised my integrity so deeply and abandoned my true presence to play a role that my own inherent illness had written for me. There are no excuses for a man who becomes so incredibly weak, and it is he himself who can begin to climb blindly from that deep pit in such a compromised and malnourished state.
Taking a toll.
And the day that I left my children's mother was when I chose to liberate myself from the bondage that is expressed when one human being decides to surrender their will to another.
Sing hallelujah. Sing hallelujah.
There are a multitude of very understandable teachings on how a human being is born into bondage, becomes aware of his situation, and then makes a break for freedom. I know that my children's mother is also writing her Exodus story, and in that story, the role I play sometimes is not a loving character. He was often pitiful, angry, hurt, sarcastic, and oh, how jealous he was. It's a number 4 Enneagram thing I mentioned earlier in my Enneagram study. May she be free from those illusions that I projected onto her. May our children be free of the erroneous teachings and victimized spirit that we surely shared with them.
Well, the springtime is almost here now, and the grass has begun to grow, and the sunshine is shining through my window, and the screen door welcomes in the wind that's blowing through my wife's kitchen.
My first ex-wife and I, very unconsciously and very naturally, came to the conclusion that she was strong and I was weak. She was smart, I was emotional. She knew how to drive to any location most directly, and I did not. My patrimonial self-hate surely helped to form this relationship that her and I agreed on. I was very foolish in so many ways. And also, I was trying very hard not to be foolish. It was all quite annihilating, humbling, laughable, and actually quite understandable how something like this could happen. I've been getting better at describing these things, and that's what my online work is about. It's about what it was like for me to rise up from the miry clay, to come out of Egypt, if you like to use Abrahamic religion language. If you don't like to speak that way, then how about this one? We have trauma written into our DNA, all of us. Everyone is trying to get over a lot of suffering that our species has been lost in. And we have also been generating another kind of energy: generosity, nurturing, empathy, compassion, creativity, hope, love, faith. Learning how to speak about our painful and layered suffering is very important. I am willing to do my part by sharing my stories with you. Sometimes my stories are cautionary tales. Sometimes they are different. When we speak of light, we may refer to both photons and waves. Light behaves like both an individuated particle and it behaves like a wave. It's very difficult, impossible perhaps, for our temporal mind to approach the quantum realm. That's where all our knowledge of good and evil starts to degrade. There is a field out there beyond the event horizon, and that is the field of which both Rumi and Christ referred. Out there past all the rights and wrongs, where love governs our expression, both particulated and wave-like in nature. We discover a treasure in that field, and so in our joy, we sell all we have and we buy that field. A rich young man came to Jesus saying, "Lord, what shall I do?" "Well," he said, "you can start by selling all your shit. Then give all you have to the poor, come back, and we'll talk." Great crowds of people were following Jesus. He turned around and he said to them, "If you want to be my follower, you got to love me more than anything else." We can be born again, over and again.
Pentatonic scales and pulse.
A great strength. We set our intent, and then we begin to ignite one to another these creative capacities. Whoa, 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 yeah, yeah, yeah.
Travelin' Trav's Travelin' String Camp, facilitating catharsis with you. Yes, right at the camera, right there. A man who is still an unconscious slave to the bondage into which he was born must pass through a ceremony, a rite of passage, and there are a multitude of faces to these ceremonies.
Who is this you were thinking you were? Who is this you? Spirit rise, spirit rise, spirit rise in the people now. Spirit rise. This is a Gibson L-5 Wes Montgomery signature model. And that makes me cry to say that. And
2, 3.
Steve, who is allowing me to play this guitar right now, one of the things he's trying to share with me is this devotion to not playing until you hear something. And if you don't hear something, don't play. And, you know, my heart aligns with that sentiment. And then also, when I get a guitar in my hand, I just want to start noodling. Who is this you were thinking you were? Who is this you? Sacred intervals, labor, and the expression of worth. Together, we are discovering our common work and our common stories. Strengthening a tribe member deepens the tribe. Many depth tribes, we can feed the world.
Any serious feminist critique of a tyrannical patriarchy or toxic masculinity must also be accompanied by a true willingness to see that, as a whole people, it is our responsibility to bring our masculine and feminine energies back into balance. There must be an authentic effort on all our parts to first balance those energies appropriately, the masculine and feminine, within each of us. Hey, do you remember that Travelin' Trav when he played the L5, that Wes Montgomery model? Yeah, that was cool.
But I'm still waiting. I'm going to wait for a moment in silence, if I can. Do-day is what I heard. I heard do-day.
Travelin' Trav? This particular manifestation of consciousness that I call me, that guy, yeah, he went on a deep dive. In his efforts to free his female partners, Trav woke up to his particular patrimony on a wide arc established by his colonial-colored skin, and that young man started tearing down everything in himself that stunk like that dirty white devil father. He surrendered all his authority once he realized how dangerous all men are. And Trav's wife of 20 years, with all that innate feminine wisdom that she could muster from her own contracted Puritan upbringing, she began to instruct Trav academically in his journey toward a manhood that seemed so unavailable in all his efforts to discover it in diverse and many institutions. And that's partially what I mean when I say again, this. Any serious feminist critique of a tyrannical patriarchy or toxic masculinity must be accompanied by a true willingness to see that, as a whole people, it is our responsibility to bring our masculine and feminine energies back into balance.
When I was 14 years old, I was visited by the great spirit of music. What I'm doing is I'm participating in what is, as I speak to this camera, as I upload to social media, but I know that what I'm truly looking for are the actual real-time, real people connections that we can make in this world.
Many marginalized groups are now finding their footing. Self-respect, we now understand, cannot be handed to us by a centralized government program under the control of the corporate or private elite. Many of us are now aware that love and respect cannot be given to us even by those institutions that we have traditionally called churches. We understand clearly now that those religious institutions are deeply allied with Empire Christianity. Empire Christianity is a broad term that I now use to describe the appropriation of the Christ story to serve empire.
What is reality? What
Excuse me.
What is?
Excuse me.
What is reality?
Excuse me. What is reality? Excuse me.
Pyramid schemes. We are now exhausted by them, the usurping of our power, the power of the people. Hi, I am this particular manifestation of consciousness that I call Trav. I am a white, middle-aged man. In the late 70s, I was tuned in to public broadcast television. Fred Rogers presented to me an alternative to toxic masculinity, and Sesame Street introduced me to a kinder and more inclusive neighborhood. I'm a true child of the TV, and my kids, they did immensely more screen time perhaps than me. The TV showed me Alex Haley's Roots, where my skin color was the same as the man whipping Kunta Kinte, who I would later come to know as Geordi in Star Trek The Next Generation, and then LeVar on Reading Rainbow when my 3 kids were little. Over many years, the white devil was uncovered in me. The epigenetic shame expression that was written in my DNA was having its say. We are an incredibly cooperative species, are we not? Look at the way we have come to some kind of agreement to create this civilization. Are we truly more conscious than the ant or the bee? What choices do we have now, as so many of us are waking up from the illusions of this greed-driven consuming culture brought to you by patrons like Empire Christianity, also the creator of Manifest Destiny? But wait, there's more. If we're tearing down systems that people are still kind of holding on to, and we're all holding on to systems, every single one of us.
Sacred intervals, y'all. Sacred intervals. Pentatonic scales. And pulse.
As you know, the devil is in the details. In deep, constant meditation on these details, we may lose our connection to any hope whatsoever. We gotta compress into a unifying story somehow. A story that more completely frees us from bondage.
Spirit rise and the people now see spirit rise.
There are some basic prayers, possibly, that even the agnostics can begin to pray.
The way I know to be forgiveness. Forgiveness is a full recovery of all the power that I have ever given away unrightly. We are not obligated to fulfill any contracts that are not legal and therefore not binding. Not legal because those contracts were established outside of love, outside of true consciousness. A man who is still an unconscious slave to the bondage into which he was born must pass through a ceremony, a rite of passage. And there are a multitude of faces to these ceremonies, but what they all have in common is the same purpose: your freedom. Our freedom, more appropriately said.
Thank you so much for making room for me, this particular manifestation of consciousness that I call Trav.
Traveling Trav's life, as he sees it so clearly, has been something of a perfect storm. Generational trauma and deep familial shame teachings are enough in themselves to cripple a man for life. And so, in his ignorance, Trav kept crawling forward, finding one teacher after another. He read, he opened his heart, he truly gave his full being to the well-being of every woman he was ever with. Trav can honestly say this was true. And also, Trav understands that there were often, perhaps, times that Travis' unconscious dishonesty, his own inability to tell himself the truth, was an injury to others. And it is because of my commitment to the deepest authentic experience that I make both these confessions and proclamations right now. Yes, there has been this perfect storm arise. The storm I call me, this particular manifestation of consciousness. I am. There was, In this one that you call, Trav, a great surrender to the feminine, a great reckoning with the woman. Travis's best attempts to crucify himself for her, himself to her in many ways, let's say unhelpful ways also. He had to undo a lot of unconscious programming. Trav discovered many inappropriate ways to sacrifice himself for the feminine. These things happen when your education told you that shame was love and love was shame. How does one become free from such madness? Have you ever given everything, all that you had, and in the end came out empty and used up? Have you ever sacrificed parts of yourself with good intention to make the peace, perhaps, but perhaps the peace you were keeping is the peace that comes after a violent surrender? Did we not all arise from this great mother that we call Earth? Are our bellies not full of violent surrenders? How many times must we murder one another in the name of our nation before we find our courage to seek together another path? The writers of our founding documents were gifted in the discovery of a great rhetoric of freedom and equality. We all understand their hypocrisy now. And hopefully we have come also to the understanding of our own hypocrisy. For who now is innocent? Will we continue to claim superiority in our bloodlines, the marginalized rising up to crush their oppressors, only to find that oppressor living in themselves? How many more times must we repeat this lesson? As many times as it takes. I'm not asking you to join any religion. I'm not asking you to believe what I'm saying. I'm here offering what I have in the great assembly that many of us now see on the horizon. Love is rising up in the people. Love is teaching us despite our arrogance and ignorance. Some have called this grace. And we are welcome here. We are welcome to help and hold one another as a sacrament to the sacred nature of being. Every open door, every friendly shore, everyone out there who has a heart to share, time to be set free, time for us to be what we have always known we were. Hey, do you remember that Traveling Trav when he played the L-5, that Wes Montgomery model? Yeah, that was cool. As we approached our 30s, my first wife, Carol, and I had already come to understand the crushing nature of empire Christianity. We had both surrendered to it in our efforts to conform, in our efforts to escape our own shameful stories, perhaps. The stories that we could not yet find acceptance for within ourselves. We sat together as a young family at a bubbling fountain at our archetypal university learning experience, Eastern New Mexico University. Together there, that day, by those bubbling waters, we cut our ties with the church as we had come to know her, and we transferred our hopeful allegiance to the universal learning experience, the university. As Carol pursued her official path through a master's and PhD, I was also invited into the music building as an instructor, as qualified only by my ability to play. Later, I would earn an associate's degree to practice physical therapy, and then, 23 years after I first went to college, I completed my bachelor's degree there at ENMU. Sacred intergenerational exchanges are super important right now. That the generations are speaking to one another and informing one another in the deepest possible ways. Sacred intervals. Whoa, 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 yeah, yeah, yeah. Pentatonic scales and pulse. It's enough. Ooh, whoa, whoa, to communicate a strength. A great strength that we must be speaking to one another now. I cut my beard, trimmed a little off. It's nice to get the mustache out of the drinks. I'm so grateful for all of you who are opening their hearts, minds, homes to Traveling Trav. The music. It's a good place to start with one another. The music. It's a good place to start with one another. The music.
it's a good place to start. We are to celebrate life together, one another, brothers and sisters. Come on, spirit rising now on the people I've seen, and I know you have too. Spirit rise in the people now. As we acknowledge ourselves as symbolic language storytelling creatures, and we realize that we do need this language. Language is a system that still, it appears, we really are quite attached to, right? So let's use it to its greatest power and begin setting our intent together. We set our intent, and then we begin to ignite one to another these creative capacities that one mind cannot create, and that when two minds who are bound to their greatest source, when they begin to commune, there is a greater communication, because it is two souls that have chosen to align themselves with the one loving will, the one love that Bob Marley spoke of. Thanks for our ancestors, right? Thank you all who have gone before, and thank you all who are coming in the future, because we are not alone. We are together. We are together. We are not alone. This is the message that I heard. Who is this you are thinking you are? Who is this you? Sacred intervals, labor, and the expression of worth. Together, we are discovering our common work and our common stories. Strengthening a tribe member deepens the tribe. Many depth tribes, we can feed the world.
Did I hear that, or did I just go to that? Because that's a pattern. That's my pattern. That's what I'm talking about. Reality.
That's right. That's right. It's reality. It's reality. Reality. Reality.